Hey everyone, finished watching the first episode of Beetleborgs, Beetle Rock, Part 1. Why is it called Beetle Rock? Like rock is in music? Because there's not really any focus on rock music, and there's not like a rock like a stone on the ground that has any relevance to this. Whatever. It's late at night outside a spooky old house. Lightning flashes and owls hoot, building the creepy atmosphere. Two kids run screaming from the house. One drops his old-timey 90s cell phone. As he reaches back for it, a clawed hand breaks up through the floorboards and snatches it. The kids hop in a limo and tell a driver to get them away. The next day, some other kids are heading to a local comic shop. Drew, his sister Jo, and their friend Roland. Drew has a crush on a girl who works at the shop, and his friends tease him about it. We're next introduced to Nano, Roland's grandmother. She was just racing a biker to the shop.
You're way too cool for me, Nano.
Inside, the kids look at the new Beetleborgs comic. Drew imagines himself as the blue Stingerborg rescuing his crush Heather from the villains. The two boys from the beginning of the episode come into the shop. They brag and try to impress Heather, but she's not having none of it. They bully Drew and his friends, and Drew challenges them to see who can stay the longest at the haunted house. The house from the opening was Hillhurst Mansion, an old abandoned house everyone in town is wary of. The kids enter the house and explore. The bullies, Van and Trip, are oblivious to monsters walking behind them. Jo bumps into a mummy. It begins to talk and then unwraps its own bandages to reveal a skull-faced creature underneath. Drew and Roland see it as well and find a place to hide. From behind some stuff, they see the skull-faced mummy meet a Frankenstein. The mummy shoots electricity into the Frankenstein's head to power him up. The kids find a secret door and escape the monsters. They follow a passageway into a room with a pipe organ. Van and Trip, meanwhile, don masks in an attempt to scare the other kids out of the house, but their plans are interrupted by the discovery of a vampire. They slam the door in his face and run away. The Frankenstein, as we learn his name is Frankenbeans, opens the door to find the vampire got his fangs stuck in the door. Back with Drew, Jo, and Roland, they've accidentally released something from the pipe organ. 3 little glowing women pop out of some pipes. They're the pipettes. They introduce someone named Flabber. Flabber is a ghostly combination of Elvis impersonator, prop comic, and Liberace. As thanks for freeing him from the organ, he offers to grant the kids a wish. Jo convinces the others to wish to be the Beetleborgs. This premiere is a bit clunky and weird, but it sets up the main characters pretty well. Several side characters are established as well, and they're all likable. Unlike previous Sabana Maritoku shows, this one is pretty upfront with how goofy it is. VR Troopers had Percy and Jeb. Masked Rider was straight up a sitcom, but I think this first episode of Beetleborgs just feels right in its tone. Surprisingly, we end before the titular heroes get their powers. We only get brief glimpses of what's to come. Roland and Jo see some characters and equipment in the Beetleborgs comic they're reading, and Drew gets a whole fantasy sequence with himself as a hero. Drew doesn't get that much characterization yet. He has a crush on Heather, and he's able to stay cool in bizarre situations. Jo is a confident tomboy, though gets spooked by some of the odd things in Hillhurst. Roland is practicing magic tricks at the beginning. Maybe that'll lead to something. Van and Trip are pompous and try to put on an air of confidence, but they're actually pretty cowardly. Also, I noticed Trip kind of looks like a younger Percy from VR Troopers. Actually, the Beetleborgs themselves look like younger versions of the Troopers. I wonder if there was anything intentional here. Heather, despite being the object of Drew's affections, is pretty bland from what we've seen of her so far. She's not a bad character, but she's definitely not someone I remember well when I think back to the show. The Hillhurst monsters are all pretty generic and scary in a kid-friendly way. They'll become far more interesting and important later. The mummy unwraps himself. This won't be the only time he does that, but I think this is the only time he has a Grim Reaper-like appearance underneath. Flabber is a fascinating being. He's a phasm, and he routinely has identity crises, which causes him to take on different personalities and demeanors. The show has aged, definitely, but that's one of the cool things about it. It's very of its time and 90s. It's nostalgic, but in, a really fun way. The behind the scenes of Beetleborgs isn't entirely known, but we're slowly uncovering crumbs of information. Originally, it wasn't going to be a tokusatsu adaptation at all. It was just a show about kids in a haunted house. Michael Argato, young Tommy from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Alien Rangers, unveiled some photos from a test pilot, including a proto-Flabber. Interestingly, Roland was going to be a heavier set, kids, quite the opposite to the lanky Roland of the show we know. This first episode doesn't provide a lot to look too deep into, but future episodes will probably more than make up for that. So that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. See ya.